Hey guys, little disclaimer, but I wanted to say that this was recorded way back in 2023, so some opinions or statements shared may not be fully accurate to what I think now, and the video style here is a lot different to what I'm going for nowadays. And to make sure that this video doesn't get obliterated with copyright strikes, I heavily modified the video to where it's under fair use. That's why it is taking me quite a while to get to that inevitable Sonic Prime video, which is neither here nor there. But just for safekeeping, here's a disclaimer here anyways. No, most of the footage I got here were either from officially uploaded clips on YouTube, or rips from DVDs I have laying around. Obviously, I always encourage people to support their favorite shows in any official way they possibly can, via streaming or physical media. With that out of the way, I really hope you enjoy this video. I've been a big fan of cartoons for the majority of my life. Okay, all of my life. But I don't love every cartoon the same, let alone every cartoon episode the same. Thus, there are episodes even from cartoons that I otherwise consider great that have episodes that aren't really very good. Ever since Phantom Strider did this list way back when, everybody wanted to give their opinions on this topic. But I decided to make my list a little different compared to the average list. I decided to also include anime in here, not only to keep this list varied, but to also point out that anime could also have its screw-ups. There's only 3 rules for this list. One is obviously 1 episode per cartoon show, that way they all have equal merits. Rule 2 is the most interesting rule, and that is if a show has ever gone through seasonal rot or is currently going through seasonal rot, and if it appears on this list, I'm only going to be including shows that were in its golden age. Now, what qualifies as seasonal rot? Well, let's take SpongeBob for example. That show had a significant decrease in quality after the first movie, and it's relatively up in the air if it's actually considered good again. Because of that, I would only consider episodes from the first 3 seasons on this list, and maybe season 4 because I actually consider season 4 part of the golden age too. Stuff like Regular Show and Adventure Time I actually don't consider shows that have gone through seasonal rot, mostly because they only have had one off season or so. And 3, this is my opinion, I'm just some guy on the internet, and if you want to argue with me, here, take this. Let's just try to have some fun. Let's get a move on.
Are you calling me stupid?
No, but I'm thinking about it now.
How can you think without a brain?
You tell jokes as good as you catch Pokemon.
You're both hurting my ears.
So it's no surprise that I love the Pokemon anime. Specifically, I love the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl anime. Really, it's only tied with XY for being my favorite portion of the show. It has some of my favorite filler episodes of the whole anime. It introduced Dawn, who is my favorite character in the whole anime. And in my opinion, the Sinnoh League is probably the best Pokemon League in the anime's history. But it did have one of the slower starts compared to any other portion of the anime. Hence to why I put this episode on here, considering the fact that it really showed some of Diamond and Pearl's growing pains. After failing to catch her very first Pokemon, Dawn and Ash get into a bit of a feud. That was until this new trainer comes along and catches their eye, Nando. He wants to pursue in both Pokemon contests and battles, so he battles both Ash and Dawn to get a feel for both, leading to them to argue about what his decision should be. Why? I should start off by saying that I don't think this episode is awful per se. I mean, I can name a few episodes for the advanced generation alone that I hate more than this one, but this episode definitely isn't getting any brownie points for me. Well, I wouldn't say I hate Nando per se, but he's definitely one of the weaker newcomers to Diamond and Pearl. I feel like characters like Barry and Zoe have a lot more personality and interesting interactions with the main characters compared to Nando. And because of that, when compared to said characters, Nando feels extremely boring.
Now to Ash and Dawn, I offer you my thanks.
But yeah, that's just a nitpick compared to what I really don't like about the episode, that being the constant bantering between Dawn and Ash. Now, I should say that this isn't the first, nor would it be the last time that Ash spends the entire episode arguing with one of his traveling companions. But it's definitely the most obnoxious, considering the fact that it feels like a step backwards for Ash's character. Not to mention, I could at least make a case for other portions of the show where this does happen. For example, Misty. They were both beginners to their Pokemon journey, and their mindsets constantly clash with one another. Also, Ash kind of f***ed over Bug really badly. Ash was kind of a dickhead in advance, so I'm not even gonna lie, so it would only make sense that May would get tired of it for at least 1 season. Oh, and her bike also got f***ed up pretty badly too. But here, Dawn makes a few mistakes and then Ash yells at her for it. And then it just kinda doesn't stop. They argue for a couple of seconds and then they act like it doesn't happen. It's only until they hear Pokemon singing in the forest that Dawn apologizes. I feel like this resolution itself is just kinda weak. I feel it's a little forced and a little bit half-hearted. It's also more annoying when you consider the fact that Ash is the one who starts these arguments, or at least instigates them. Like I said in one of my older videos, I think that the Champ Twins is a much better version of this episode. It's less obnoxious, it's better paced, and the resolution is a lot more satisfying. Oh, and it's not the 4th episode of the damn show. One thing I want to say before moving on is that I don't think the animation looks that good. Like I said, Diamond and Pearl had its growing pains, but golly, this is definitely the most off-model the show has gotten before. Look at Dawn, for example. She has really wide shoulders in one scene, and in the next she has sonic limbs. This is just a straight up animation error that lasts for several seconds. Overall, this episode is just bad. Nothing terrible, but it definitely sticks out in a series with very high highs. Like when Dawn's bike got destroyed, let's go!
The first thing I'm gonna do is take all your lame-ass high school memories and bury them all in the morgue, you losers! You hear me? The morgue!
I'm gonna try to keep this as brief as possible because Toradora is a show that is definitely worth watching through and through, even if that means going through what is probably the worst arc in the show. And this is the only entry on this list that's spoiler heavy, so you can only skip this entry and watch the rest of the video. Something is seriously wrong with Kitamura as he's going through an identity crisis at the moment. He bleached his hair and showed serious signs of depression. It turns out that he's feeling this way because the girl he likes is going to study to be an astronaut in America. But when he finally gets back up on his feet, his crush still has to convince him to run for student council. That's when he finally gets elected and he confesses his love for Surime in front of everybody.
I beg your pardon?
She plays it off and leaves Kitamura hanging. This leads to everybody except for Kitamura making her the bad guy. And Taiga beats the absolute shit out of her, despite the fact that she also hurt Kitamura, which... yeah, that's not hypocritical. Kitamura is finally the student council president and Taiga is suspended for 2 weeks. All of that was in 22 minutes. Yeah, kinda cluttered, huh? And you wanna know the best part about that statement? This is part 2 of a 2-parter. The first half of it is honestly not that bad. The pacing's fine and I think that it's a nice follow-up to what came before. And I think it was building up to something very important to Kitamura's character. That was until the second half completely dropped the ball. After feeling just fine, Kitamura automatically goes back to being depressed again and not wanting to do the student council. Right after he promised his school that he would be the best president he could be. Again, it took until Surime telling him to run for student council is when he starts running for student council. Not only that doesn't make sense, but he also takes his ass, let me confess my love for you in front of thousands of people in our school. Because yeah, that's what you want to do as your debut as student council president, totally embarrass the one you love in front of your entire school. And not to mention that Surime is the one seen as the bad person in this situation, even though she literally did nothing wrong. Hey guys, for some relationship advice, put your crush on the spot and absolutely embarrass them in front of thousands of people, because if they say no, then they're automatically a monster. And I got someone over to Taiga too, because she's absolutely simping Kitamura. And I know that's such a dumb term for me to use unironically, but that's literally what she's doing! And it's so infuriating to watch at points. And it gets to the point where she starts breaking down crying because she knows that she'd made a wrong decision, but she just wants the best for Kitamura. There's also this portion at the end with Minarine and Ami, and I don't get it.
Now you don't have to feel guilty.
Even as someone who's seen the show in its entirety at least 5 times at this point, I still don't get what this means. This episode's just stupid. I just don't get it. I will say that the beginning half of this episode is pretty okay, but besides that, the rest of the episode just kinda sucks. I don't even have a clever way to end this. Except for the fact that I still think you should watch Toradora. I think it's really, really good. One of my favorite animes of all time. Hey, this is post-editing Hatman here. I decided to put this segment to talk about my thoughts on the finale. This is a spoiler portion I talked about at the beginning of the segment, but I didn't put the finale on here because, while I can see why people think it's a disappointing ending to the show, I personally don't see it that way. I think it's more of like a bittersweet kind of ending that was admittedly a little rushed, but not too bad. Obviously, there's some portions I don't like the slap that Minorin gave to Ryuji that was kind of unnecessary. And also, I feel like the whole thing with Taiga just abandoning them, but then coming back at the very end, it was a little weird. Besides that, I didn't really think it ruined. I don't really think it was that bad of a finale. It was flawed for sure, but I just didn't think it was as bad as this episode. I didn't think it was that stupid. I liked the message and I liked the symbolism it was going for, but I just didn't think it hit all fronts with it. But yeah, that's why I didn't put the finale on here. Next entry. Woo!
See, they look exactly the same. That's sick. I think you need some water. All that picking has dehydrated you.
Panty and Stocking is a very weird show. I mean, saying Panty and Stocking is an extremely complex show with a heavy emphasis on narrative storytelling is like saying John Craig Lucy is a decent human. Everyone in Downton City, for some reason, has a huge obsession with picking their nose. Don't worry, Mom, I'll be moving out by Wednesday. Panty and Stocking are then invited to this gathering, hosted by this rich guy who owns a cafe. Followed by more scenes of people picking their noses. Panty realizes that the guy who hosted the the host is a ghost, so everybody is forced to keep picking their nose, and then Panty and Stocking have to stop the ship from going to the moon. Trust me, for Panty and Stocking standards, this is tame. And that's kind of why it sucks. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that gross-out humor is very hard to get right. But this show made an episode about shit funny, so I don't know what that tells you.
What? Are you talking about that walking turnsicle over there?
And that goth chick next to it who obviously has daddy issues?
This feels like the opposite of that episode, though. While that episode had a fair amount of raunchiness to it, its main focus is still on the witty writing and great character dialogue. Here, its main focus is just being raunchy for the sake of being raunchy. Thus, it's a lot easier to be bothered by the gross out in this episode. Seriously, how do you make an episode about boogers more disgusting than an episode about shit? An objectively more disgusting topic. They're just boring booger jokes without any of that Panty and Stocking charm to it. It's just not as funny as a normal Panty and Stocking episode would be, which is why I personally consider it the least rewatchable and without a doubt the worst episode of the show. I put it above the last two because I could at least make some sort of excuses for why they turned out the way they did, while this show has already gotten gross out humor right before. It's not that I consider it unwatchable or anything, just really gross.
Have a nice week, diaper boy.
Regular Show was one of those cartoons that was really hard for me to find a bad episode in, because most of the episodes that people consider bad are episodes I actually really like or consider guilty pleasures. This episode, on the other hand, doesn't fall into either of those categories. Because Mordecai keeps failing to make a move on Margaret, Muscle Man makes a bet with him. He has to kiss Margaret by midnight on Friday or else he wears a diaper for an entire week. Contrary to popular belief, I actually didn't mind the relationship-focused episodes in Regular Show, but this episode in particular more annoyed me with the way Muscle Man and Rigby inserted themselves into Mordecai's situation. I mean, at the very beginning of the episode, they literally watch Mordecai and Margaret be awkward towards one another. And during the day, all these two do is follow Mordecai and Margaret until midnight hits. Let's talk about that moment, actually. He prepares himself for the big moment, and then the whole park turns into ice? Usually this kind of thing happens for reasons explained in the episode, but okay, let's just ignore that right now. After Muscle Man and Rigby get out of the car, Margaret then scolds Mordecai for making a bet with Muscle Man, which, I mean, I understand why that would make her mad, but didn't Margaret do something similar like this and do me a solid? Granted, not in the same scenario, but it's still similar enough to draw comparisons.
Margaret does solids for me all the time.
Yeah! Like tonight I broke a date so Eileen could go out with Rigby. So you bet, Muscle Man, that you could kiss me?
I can't believe you, Mordecai. Here I thought we were having a great time on a fun date,
And it was all for a dumb bet?
And obviously I understand why this would make her mad, but at the same time, you also feel really bad for Mordecai. Well, at least I do, because he ends up having to wear the diaper because Margaret does this bullshit to him.
Have a nice week, diaper boy.
Which was a big troll move on the show's part. And really, that's the most annoying thing about this episode. Mordecai constantly just gets the short end of the stick just for being Mordecai. So why do I like episodes like Do Me a Solid compared to episodes like this? Well, because Do Me a Solid's actually funny. While as to Do or Diaper is a very monotonous episode that barely cracks any jokes. That's really it, honestly. I know people consider Do or Diaper a bad episode, but not the worst episode of the whole show. But like I said, the more infamous episodes like Think Positive, I consider more guilty pleasures in my opinion. But it's overall a lot harder for me to think positive about this episode.
Think he'll really do it?
Not a chance.
Wanna follow him?
Yeah.
Even the stuff you kept in that secret box under the bed. Whoa! What the? What's that?
Nothing. Just Wendy stuff from old times.
Grunkle Stan and the kids go on a trip around Oregon, but because Dipper still has feelings for Wendy, Grunkle Stan gives him advice about how to talk to girls. However, it ends up working too well because one of Mabel's friends, Candy, develops a crush for Dipper. However, things get out of hand really fast, and Dipper breaks Candy's heart. Meanwhile, Stan is kidnapped by a spider lady, they save him, they escape, and Dipper reconciles, ending this episode. It was a hard choice between this and regular shows Do or Diaper, but I think this episode was inherently worse for a few reasons I'll get into. And like Do or Diaper, I think that the main problem with this episode is that Dipper's treatment is a little unjustified. I mean, don't get me wrong, he didn't make the best choices in this episode, but he was only doing what Stan advised him to, which is what Mabel wanted him to do at the start.
Move on.
But when he's clearly not interested in Candy, that's apparently a bad thing. And it's not like Dipper was the one to ask her out, no. He clearly doesn't have any interest in her. And the way she falls in love with Dipper is also relatively confusing.
Candy, looking great, looking great. Is that a new pair of glasses? Very shiny. Woo!
But Dipper seems different.
Yes, good different.
Am I blind or something? Because all I see is that he has a bit more confidence than before. But besides that, yeah, he's still Dipper 99.9%. I feel like this would have worked a lot better if Candy was shown to have feelings for Dipper episodes prior. I also just really don't like how they bring up the whole Wendy plotline out of nowhere. Again, I feel like this could have been touched upon way earlier. I also think it would have been a lot better if Dipper was shown to be more cocky throughout the episode, developing more of an ego with the more girls he meets. It would have made that moment to where they all confront him a lot more satisfying and a lot more deserving. But again, he's antagonized for taking everyone else's advice. Also, boo, the spider lady was lame. The pacing isn't the worst thing out there, but it is a pretty boring episode minus all the annoying factors. So why do I dislike this episode more than Do or Diaper? Well, one, Mordecai could still be partially blamed for being in the wrong here. He was the one who took on Muscle Man's bet, and he was the one who overdid it with preparing for the kiss. While Dipper gets antagonized for following Stan's and Mabel's advice, just because it's not going their way. 2, a lackluster episode in Gravity Falls is a much bigger stick out compared to a lackluster episode in regular show. And 3, this episode is longer. While it's overall not fully reflected by my list, episodes that are longer I tend to have stronger opinions on. So while this episode isn't anything terrible, it's anything but attractive.
Plus, after seeing you flee the spider like a baby, I kinda lost interest.
Yep. I deserve that.
Can't you just feel the energy? I love this town!
Oh, shut up, you jerk!
There was many Powerpuff Girls episodes I could have chosen, but I chose this one in particular for reasons I'll explain later. So Professor Utonium gets a job, so him and the girls move to
The town of Citiesville.
really clever name. Whoever came up with that is getting a raise. Also, right off the bat, I could already tell you that there's a big plot hole in this episode that literally everybody has pointed out. Towards the end of the second season, there was this episode called Speed Demon, where the girls travel 50 years into the future without their existence, and because of that, him took over. Glad to see that that doesn't matter anymore. Also, they move into a crabby apartment and the girls get made fun of at school. They also attempt to reach out to all the adults telling them that they're superheroes and that they're ready to help whenever they're needed. But they constantly get brushed off over and over again. Even when they stop a bank robbery, they get scolded just for destroying the bridge. And because of that, they're prohibitively banned to use their powers, meaning that they can't even fly home. Meaning the girls get literally crapped on. Yeah, I feel the same way, Bubbles. And after a rough night, they finally tell the professor that they've had enough of the town of Citiesville. That's still a stupid name. But it turns out that the professor feels the exact same way because people at his work called him a square.
Square, the shape of evil.
So the girls move back to the city of Townsville, thus ending this painful episode. Now, I get what this episode was trying to do. I could tell it was trying to be a more realistic take on the Powerpuff Girls formula. But it doesn't work because the Powerpuff Girls formula itself is meant to be unrealistic. It just does not align with the Powerpuff Girls writing style at all. It's inherently kind of like how I view the Sonic movies. For as much as I love them, Sonic being in a live-action surreal world is inherently a fundamentally flawed concept. Just like how I find Mario Kart being on a mobile device a fundamentally flawed concept from the very start. Wait, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, Powerpuff Girl. And that's only my issue with the episode concept-wise. In execution, it's even worse. Everybody in the town of Citiesville treats the girls like complete shit. Not only is it extremely unnecessary, but also it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, I don't condone violence or anything, but when push does come to shove, this could also go for the adults who are also extremely unlikable. The mayor's kind of a stuck-up jackass with no real emotion. The teacher's just a cliche stickler, and the bus driver is literally just fat out. And besides all that, this episode's just a slog. Like, let's take the scene where they're walking home, for example. Does this scene feel a lot longer than it is? I don't know if it's just me, but I feel the scene goes on for like 3 more minutes than it actually is. And that's assuming you don't feel bad for the Powerpuff Girls, which that's pretty much impossible to do. So yeah, this episode is pretty bad. But believe it or not, this is not the worst episode of the entire show, let alone the franchise. Hell, it's not even my least favorite episode of the original series. A Very Special Blossom actually holds that title, believe it or not, but I left it off the list for one very important reason. Blossom's just my favorite character in the show. Like, that's literally the reason, that's it. So because of that, I wanted to avoid any bias I had for A Very Special Blossom. As for the other infamous episodes like the Sunbleached episode or the City of Frownsville, like I said, if a show on this list experienced seasonal rot, I'm only going to be including episodes that were in its golden age. And minor spoilers, but Powerpuff Girls is the only show on this list that experienced seasonal rot. So with all those factors into consideration, Town and Out was my only real choice for this list. And I guess you could say that my reaction was similar to the girls when waiting for the mayor. Just waiting for it to be over.
I love this town! Shut up!
Why don't you get a room?
Something I felt went severely underappreciated in Adventure Time during its run was the relationship between Finn and Flame Princess. I think their relationship was not only cute, but it really expanded upon their characters. That was until Frost and Fire completely tarnished that and came crashing down exponentially. After seeing Flame Princess absolutely beating the shit out of the Ice King, Finn starts having these weird dreams that feature the Cosmic Owl. So from that moment forward, he starts manipulating Flame Princess to fight the Ice King time and time again. Now I will say, I think the fight scenes and the animation itself look great. I think the concept of Flame Princess and the Ice King having a rivalry because of their elements is an awesome idea. But where the episode fumbles is Finn. Finn, for some reason, gets an absolute kick out of seeing these two beating the shit out of each other, which is not only uncomfortable to witness, but also just feels wrong while watching.
My body is engulfed in flames!
It completely derails his character from this moment forward. It also makes this nice act where he tries to save the Ice King at the end feel a little disingenuous. Speaking of the end, the ending itself is so hard to watch if you're a fan of these two together. It's only until his dreams start getting even weirder is when he comes up to apologize for it, not even realizing how much damage he's done to Ice King and Flame Princess emotionally. And that last part really derails everything that Finn was set up to be at that point. Finn was and will continue to be a hero who fought for the right reasons rather if it was the right decision or not. That's the Finn that we grew to love and appreciate. But that's not the Finn that's displayed in this episode, thus it feels like his character has been completely derailed. Thus it also has a big negative effect on episodes like The Red Throne and Too Old, the latter of which I also considered for this list. But Frost and Fire was not only the beginning of these episodes, but also the absolute worst. However, the only reason I didn't put it any higher than it is right now, they made an extremely satisfying conclusion to this whole arc in Season 8's Bun Bun, indicating that Finn just needed to grow up and mature a lot more. He wasn't ready for a serious relationship at that point, and it's moments like that that make me look back on Adventure Time relatively fondly. But like Flame Princess, I was extremely burnt out after watching this episode.
But I said I was sorry.
Yeah, I'm not gonna beat around the bush for this one. I'm pretty sure you all saw this one coming.
Some freaky stuff has been known to happen there.
Why are we whispering? What do you mean?
Monsters.
Yeah, this video wouldn't be complete without this episode in particular, would it? It's a testament to how absolutely terrible it is, considering the fact that I only have found 2 episodes from good cartoons that are worse than this. So this segment's gonna be a little bit brief, considering the fact that I've already talked about this in my last top 5. So to recap my main problems with this episode in particular, it's a torture episode. So Big G invites all of his friends to a sleepover in the mountains, but him and Sneech use this as an opportunity to mess with Nobi and thus embarrass him. So Nobi tries to get back at him with a gadget of Doraemon's. So yeah, sounds like a simple Big G messes with Nobi plot, but what makes this one so bad? Simple, my friend. Everybody in this episode is such a dick. Like, not even just Big G and Sneech, no, Sue and Doraemon are complete douchebags in this episode for no reason. And normally that's already bad enough, but this episode is also twice as long as an average episode of the show. And normally with that time, you could actually watch a good episode of the show, or 2 good episodes of the show. Look, the point is that this episode is a waste of time. And above all else, I Saw a Ghost just does not feel like an episode of the Doraemon Bang Zoom dub. It's not funny, it's not creative, and the characters just plain suck in this episode. Rather if they're poorly used like Big G and Sneech, or they're just straight up botched like Sue and Doraemon. If you want me to elaborate more, then go watch my top 5 worst Doraemon episodes 2022 edition. Going into making this list a few years ago, I was almost certain this was going to be number 1 on this list. But unfortunately for me, as you could already tell, there's still 2 entries left on this very list. You know, 2013 really wasn't a great year in terms of Cartoon Network shows. Not because we got shows like Teen Titans Go and Steven Universe, which I think are both okay, but mainly because this year in particular, a lot of shows from the Renaissance era of Cartoon Network took a dip in quality. Not necessarily seasonal rot like the Powerpuff Girls, but 2013 did mark some of the best Cartoon Network shows' worst episodes. I consider Do or Diaper regular show's worst episode, and that aired in 2013. Adventure Time had a brief decline in quality after Frost and Fire, which again aired in 2013. But to me, Gumball had it the absolute worst with its second half of its second season, starting with The Hero. It starts with Richard overhearing Gumball and Darwin talking about how embarrassing he could be around their friends, which leads to Nicole and Anais treating Gumball and Darwin like complete shit. And due to Gumball sticking by his word with absolute pride, him and Darwin struggle to eat and even bathe. Thus, we see Richard singing a song about caring for the boys, which Darwin overhears. Thus, he makes a plan that absolutely backfires, thus Richard has to save them. If you're a Gumball fan, you already know what people hate about this episode. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't cool about what Gumball and Darwin said about Richard in the beginning of the episode, but they're not completely wrong. Don't get me wrong, Richard is probably my favorite character in the whole show. I love him. But you can't entirely blame Gumball and Darwin for finding him embarrassing. And I know they're not the only ones who think that way either about him. So reactions like this...
What is wrong with you? You know very well what's wrong.
What's going on? Why is dinner wrong?
You know very well why dinner is wrong.
...is not only completely unnecessary, but also draws lines that abuse-worthy. Oh, and B, like I just said, I'm pretty sure Gumball and Darwin aren't the only people in the family that think that way about him. And you know, I'll let it slide for Anais, she is the sassy one after all. But Nicole's treatment of the boys is absolutely abysmal, ignoring the fact that they talked about Richard with no malicious intent whatsoever, as they got caught up in the heat of things. But I also think I need to bring up the fact that Gumball and Darwin are kids. Kids are a lot more immature and more likely to word things wrong compared to adults. They don't mean to be disrespectful, but sometimes the heat of everything and the miswording of it all could come off that way. So when you put into that perspective, these scenes are only worse. But Jesus, tap dancing cries, it's like this episode makes me want to hate Gumball because in the second half when Richard is saving him, he keeps coming up with these one-liners and sarcastic quotes and it's like, dude, shut up! I feel everything in this episode just feels so forced. Again, I do feel bad for Richard. His song was genuinely adorable and I love it a lot, but it's another factor that I feel is a little bit forced in to make you hate Gumball. Again, I do like the song, I think it's cute, but it feels forced. And I think that pretty much sums up everything I have to say about this episode. With its absolutely terrible treatment of Gumball and Darwin, the way Nicole's character is horribly botched, and scenes that are forced at best and insufferable to watch at worst. And you know, I don't know how many people will agree with me on this, but I gotta say, this is probably one of the worst episodes to ever air on a Cartoon Network show. There are shows like the Powerpuff Girls reboot and Total Dramarama that inherently have much worse episodes than this, but because those shows have a bad reputation overall, those episodes themselves just blend with each other, with a few exceptions of course. But to me personally, Gumball was one of the big three on Cartoon Network during the Renaissance era of the 2010s. So with that context alone, it without a doubt makes The Hero, in my opinion, the worst episode of a good Western cartoon. Keywords, Western cartoon. So before I reveal my number one pick, I'm going to list a few honorable and dishonorable mentions. Honorable mentions are going to be episodes that you would argue should be on this list, but I kept them off for reasons I'll explain. Dishonorable mentions are episodes that didn't make it but I heavily did consider for this list. For honorable mentions, I'm going to go with Do Me a Solid from Regular Show, an episode I see that a lot of people dislike, and quite honestly, I disagree. It's not only hilarious, but it's kind of relatable, and I mean that in a good way. I remember me and or my cousins were like Rigby in this episode, and we were just so petty using our favors for petty reasons, and it was, I don't know, I kind of relate to it a lot. It's funny. I think the hate boils down to people just thinking, oh, Rigby treats Mordecai like crap and it's automatically bad, and you know, I can understand that mindset to an extent, but I don't think this episode gets to a point of being mean-spirited. It's just two guys messing with each other. And you could argue Do or Diaper is the same way, but I think that's a lot worse considering the fact that they're just kind of prying into Mordecai's love life, and I don't know, I just thought that it was always kind of annoying. I'm With Stupid from SpongeBob also gets an honorable mention for the exact same reasons. I like the episode even though I understand the hate for it. And for the last of the honorable mentions, we have Holiday from Gakugurashi. On its own, it's another good episode of Gakugurashi. I think the show itself is consistently great. It's without a doubt one of my personal favorite animes of all time. But compared to the rest of the series, I think that this episode has the least to offer. But again, good episode. I don't really skip any episode of Gakugurashi when rewatching it. I think it's an overall fantastic series. Now on to the dishonorable mentions, which consists of Sleeping with the Frenemy from Bob's Burgers. And you know, it's hard to find a bad episode in Bob's Burgers, and I feel like there's a difference between episodes that I don't like and an episode that I just straight up think is bad. This one I think is bad and I just don't like. I feel bad for Tina in the episode, and I think Tammy is insufferable, and you know, I get that's the point, but that doesn't mean that the episode is enjoyable. Self-proclaimed Night Natsuki Subaru from ReZero. This is without a doubt the most unlikable Subaru has been in the ReZero anime, and I think this is also the part where people started to hate Amelia a lot more. I could be wrong on that, but I can see why if this is the case, but I also disagree, because I think she gets a lot better, especially in Season 2. Regardless, I also really hated the pacing for this episode. I think that parts were too slow, and then there was other parts that went by way too fast, and I think that the pacing is a little bit all over the place. I was also really disappointed that this is the last appearance we saw of Fel, at least for Season 1, but yeah, I kept this episode off the list, however, because this is a very important episode to the series, continuity-wise at least. Pip from South Park. Boring, ugly as sin, and very, very unnecessary. Though that could be said about the character himself. A new member from K-On! K-On! Is my favorite anime, I just want to say that right off the bat, and I hate this episode. I really do. It's not even the fact that I don't like Asusa and this is her introduction episode, no. I just straight up don't like the other girls. I think that they are pretty annoying in this episode. I think Yui's annoying, I think Ritsu is annoying, and that's funny because Ritsu is my favorite character in this whole show. I think Mugi's a little bit annoying, and I don't really like Mia all that much either. Also, a lot of the scenes in this episode are a little bit too fanservice-y for me. Like, I personally don't care for fan service that much. I mean, I'm a big Data Live fan that has a lot of fan service, but here in K-On! It feels so out of place and unnecessary. But really, I couldn't really put it into words why I disliked the episode for the longest time, and I do think that everything else on this list is a lot worse, so take that as you will. I still love K-On! And for the last dishonorable mention on this list, I'm gonna go with Play It Again Brian from Family Guy. And I would have easily put this on this list, without a doubt, but I can't pinpoint exactly when Family Guy's prime days were. Like, everybody says, oh, anything before season 12 is good, anything before season 7 is good. It's so hard to pinpoint exactly when Family Guy went downhill for me, or even for other people, but yeah, I would, if this was considered Family Guy's prime days, then I definitely would have put this on the list, without a doubt. Now, with all of that said, it's time for number 1. There were many bad episodes on this list. We talked about episodes that are just boring, sloppy, inferior to other good episodes of said series, awkward, unfair, fundamentally flawed, character derailing, mean-spirited, and straight up hard to watch episodes. But we've pretty much covered everything that makes a bad episode, well, bad. So really, what is there left to cover? How about we put all of what I said into one big bad episode of a show that is relatively easy to get into? Not only that, but completely destroying what we built up to for years. Rika Takanashi, I got a bone to pick with you.
And yet, there's still a voice inside me saying, no! And why? And
Wow, I had no idea you were so possessive.
Now, I know this is probably going to be the most controversial pick on my list, as not only a lot of people seem to really enjoy this episode, but some people even consider it amongst the best episodes of the entire show. And with all due respect, no! I'm sorry, but I think this episode is just god-awful. During class, Rika sees Yuta being handed a flash drive by Ishiki. All the girls tie him up and find out what's on the flash drive, which only contains pictures of a now retired pop star. Yuta is then told to return the flash drive to Ishiki, but he takes it home instead. Rika finds the flash drive, breaks it, and they argue for the rest of the episode. So it's an episode about the characters arguing for 22 minutes. So was Dawn of a New Era, but at least in that episode there was time to breathe. It wasn't in its entirety. This shit happens up until the very last scene. And it's just as awkward as it is annoying. Not to mention its pacing is absolutely abysmal. It feels like a series of random events put sloppily together and called an episode. Kinda like the Toradora episode I talked about earlier. I also want to mention that all the girls blame everything that happens in this episode solely on Yuta. The pictures of the pop star, all Yuta's fault. Rika breaking Ishiki's flash drive, all Yuta's fault. Oh, Station Square is under attack? You bet it was that bitch-ass Yuta! And that's not to say I like Yuta in this episode at all, far from it. But that does not excuse how obnoxious the other characters behave. Most notably, Nibu f***ing Tani. She is overly self-righteous. Doesn't that ring a bell with any of you? But again, Yuta is not any better. In fact, he's arguably worse. When the girls find out about the flash drive, he downplays the situation and generalizes by saying all guys do this. But then he contradicts himself by saying this.
I see. So you're saying it's okay if Takanashi does the same thing? What an incredible specimen.
The Dark Flame Master will not allow it!
A few minutes later.
I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, girls do this too, right?
See what I mean? The derailment of Rika and annoyance of Nibutani's character especially are on the same level, if not worse, than I Saw a Ghost characterization. And that's one of the last things you want to remind me about. And Yuta's characterization was botched in a similar vein to Finn in Frost and Fire. I swear to God, I was yelling at the screen just wanting them to shut the hell up.
Why are you siding with her?
Well, this all started with you betraying her trust. You said you'd give it back and then took it with you.
But that's not the issue.
Oh, yes it is. None of this would have ever happened if you had just kept yourself.
Shut the fuck up. Deal with it.
And it feels like this episode has no idea what to do with itself. It obviously wants to tackle the topic of betraying one's trust, but Season 2 was literally an entire arc of Yuta and Rika growing their relationship and trusting each other. Enough to where a common complaint of Season 2 is the love triangle between Yuta, Rika, and Shichimiya, even though it was a test of their relationship's strength and how much they trusted one another. It's not only fundamentally flawed like Town and Now, but the message is completely botched like the hero from Gumball. And even after all that, you're still probably asking yourself, is this really the worst? Like, is it actually worse than episodes that treat characters that do nothing wrong as if they commit Grand Theft Auto? Is it really worse than episodes that actively make me look at a character differently? Or worse than episodes that are just generally badly written? Well, yes actually. And it's purely because I feel this episode is the biggest slap in the face to its show of origin. Not only it has the majority of the other episode's flaws, but it actively feels like it completely misunderstands what made Love Chunibyo a fantastic series. Chunibyo isn't a groundbreaking masterpiece that should be studied for the ages, but under its slice-of-life comedic nature is a multi-layered series of these characters growing to understand themselves as people. Season 1 ended with a fantastic arc of not only Rika learning to accept her life, with all the sadness that comes with it, but also the other characters learning to accept Rika, understand Rika, love Rika. Moments like Rika jumping into Yuta's arms, making a great escape with their friends by their side, and cycling to the sunrise making their great escape to face the future ahead of them. Love Chunibyo is a beautiful series. A beautiful series that is not properly represented by this episode. This episode tells me that these characters cannot stand each other, trust each other. It puts all of that on the back burner in favor of repetitive jokes, annoying bickering, and a stupid trust issues plot that was already done by this show. And I understand that people feel disappointed with Season 2 because of its shortcomings, but these characters still feel like they care for one another. And to me, that's what truly makes this the worst episode of any cartoon I consider great. But you know, it really does say something when you feel this passionate about an episode you otherwise don't really like at all. I always really like the idea of talking about episodes from good cartoons that are otherwise not really good. It's a test to see what you see in the show, how well you know and love these characters. And hell, when people disagree with you, it makes for a fun discussion. Hell, I even constructed a few unpopular opinions in this video myself. But not only that's perfectly okay, but it allows different interpretations and different points of view. I love animation. I love talking about animation. Rather if that's cartoons, anime, animated films, I just love it. And while it may have been in a negative light, I'm really happy I got to talk about some of my favorite cartoons and anime of all time. And 1 or 2 bad episodes of said shows are not going to make me view them any less than I do. I'm still a fan of most of, if not all of these shows. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been a lot of fun doing this again. If you want to see more videos like this, then give it a like, maybe subscribe, and keep on being happy, Super Hat fans.
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.